Hello, welcome back. It's very hot in my apartment. It's 31 degrees. That's hot if you're from Scandinavia. Let's read some more because this camcorder needs 24 hours to charging. And I need it for make some Danish video about seaplanes, flying boats. So I just was outside, buy a bit candy, salty licorice. It's 3:30 p.m. So I will go to my bed, read this. Or I never get finished. I like to read this because the Japan did build some very good flying boats in the Second World War. So I like to read this, and Japan's self-defense and Pacific War. But let's start to read this.
Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service. Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service Seedai Nippon Teikaku Kigun Koku Tai Rising Sun Flag Active 1912-1945 Country Empire of Japan Branch Imperial Japanese Navy Type Naval Aviation Engagements World War I Sino-Japanese War World War II Commander Ceremonial Chief Emperor of the Apenatable Commander Chuichi Nagumo Minoru Gendarmite Suo Fuida Insignia Roundel. The Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service, Dai Nippon Teikaku Kigun KK Tai, IJNAS, was the air arm of the Imperial Japanese Navy, IJN. The organization was responsible for the operation of naval aircraft and the conduct of aerial warfare in the Pacific War. The Japanese military acquired their first aircraft in 1910 and followed the development of air combat during World War I with great interest. They initially procured European aircraft but quickly built their own and launched themselves into an ambitious aircraft carrier building program. They launched the world's first purpose-built aircraft carrier HSH in 1922. Afterwards they embarked on a conversion program of several excess battle cruisers and battleships into aircraft carriers. The IJN Air Service had the mission of national air defense, deep strike, naval warfare, and so forth. It retained this mission to the end. The Japanese pilot training program was very selective and rigorous, producing a high-quality and long-serving pilot corps, who were very successful in the air during the early part of World War II in the Pacific. However, the long duration of the training program, combined with a shortage of gasoline for training, did not allow the IJN to rapidly provide qualified replacements in sufficient numbers. Moreover, Japan, unlike the US or Britain, never altered its program to speed up the training process of its recruits. Their resultant decrease in quantity and quality, among other factors, resulted in increasing casualties toward the end of war. Japanese Navy aviators, like their Army counterparts, preferred maneuverable aircraft, leading to lightly built but extraordinarily agile types, most famously the A6M0, which achieved its feats by sacrificing armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Aircraft with armor and self-sealing fuel tanks, such as the Kawanishi N1KJ, would not enter service until late 1944-1945, which was too late to have a meaningful impact. The Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service was equal in function to the Royal Navy S Fleet Air Arm, FAA. Early history. Origins. Seaplane carrier Wakamiya. The beginnings of Japanese naval aviation were established in 1912, with the creation of a Commission on Naval Aeronautical Research, Kigun Kokatsu Kenkai Kai, under the authority of the Technical Department. The commission was charged with the promotion of aviation technology and training for the Navy. Initially its focus was in non-rigid airships, but it quickly moved on to the development of winged and powered aircraft. 1. That year, the Commission decided to purchase foreign winged aircraft and to send junior officers abroad to learn how to fly and maintain them. 2. The Navy purchased 2 seaplanes from the Glenn Curtiss factory in Hammond Sport, New York, and 2 Maurice Starman seaplanes from France. 2. To establish a cadre of naval aviators and technicians, the Navy also dispatched 3 officers to Hammond Sport and 2 to France for training and instruction. 2. After their return to Japan at the end of 1912, 2 of the newly trained naval aviators made the first flights at Apama'an Yokosuka Bay, one in a Curtiss seaplane, the other in a Maurice Farman. 3. In 1912, the Royal Navy had also informally established its own flying branch, the Royal Naval Air Service. The Japanese admirals, whose own navy had been modeled on the Royal Navy and whom they admired, themselves proposed their own naval air service. The Japanese Navy had also observed technical developments in other countries and saw that the airplane had potential. Within a year, the Imperial Japanese Navy had begun the operational use of aircraft. In 1913, the following year, a Navy transport ship, Wakamiya Maru, was converted into a seaplane carrier capable of carrying 2 assembled and 2 disassembled seaplanes. 3. Wakamiya also participated in the naval maneuvers off Sasebo. Siege of Tsintal. Yokosuka Rogo Kyogate, the first domestic designed and built seaplane. On the 23rd of August, 1914, as a result of its treaty with Great Britain, Japan declared war on Germany. The Japanese, together with a token British force, blockaded then laid siege to the German colony of Jiaoju and its administrative capital Qingdao on the Shandong Peninsula. During the siege, starting from September, 4 Farman seaplanes, 2 active and 2 reserve, on board Wakamiya conducted reconnaissance and aerial bombardments on German positions and ships. The aircraft had crude bomb sights and carried 6 to 10 bombs that had been converted from shells, and were released through metal tubes on each side of the cockpit. 4. On 5 September, during the first successful operation, 2 Farman seaplanes dropped several bombs on the Bismarck Battery, the main German fortifications in Tsintal. The bombs landed harmlessly in the mud, but the aircraft were able to confirm that the light cruiser SMS Emden was not at Tsintal. This was intelligence of major importance to Allied Naval Command. 4. On 30 September, Wakamiya was damaged by a mine and later sent back to Japan for repairs. But the seaplanes, by transferring onto the shore, continued to be used against the German defenders until their surrender on 7 November 1914. Wakamiya conducted the world's first naval-launched aerial raids in history, N1, and was in effect the first aircraft carrier of the Imperial Japanese Navy. N2. By the end of the siege, the aircraft had conducted 50 sorties and dropped 200 bombs, although damage to German defenses was light. 6. Further developments, 1916-1918. In 1916, the Commission on Naval Aeronautical Research was disbanded and the funds supporting it were reallocated for the establishment of 3 naval air units, Haikote, which would fall under the authority of the Naval Affairs Bureau of the Navy Ministry. The first unit was established at Yokosuka in April 1916. However, the lack of a specific naval air policy in these early years was made apparent by the fact that the Yokosuka Air Group operated with the fleet only once a year when it was transported briefly to whatever training area the IJN was then using for maneuvers. 3. Japanese naval aviation, though, continued to make progress. In 1917, Officers at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal designed and built the first Japanese seaplane, the Rogo Kyogaite reconnaissance seaplane, which was much more useful at sea and much safer than the Maurice Farman aircraft that the Navy had been using up to that point. 3. The aircraft was eventually mass-produced and became the mainstay of the Navy's air arm until the mid-1920s. Japanese factories by the end of the war, in increasing numbers, were beginning to turn out engines and fuselages based on foreign designs. 3. A major expansion in Japanese naval air strength was part of the 1918 Naval Expansion Program, which made possible a new air group and a naval air station at Sasebo. In 1918, the IJN secured land around Lake Kasumagora in Ibaraki Prefecture, northeast of Tokyo. The following year, a naval air station for both land and sea aircraft was established, and subsequently, naval air training was transferred to Kasumagora, from Yokosuka. After the establishment of a naval air training unit at Kasumagora, the air station became the principal flight training center for the Navy. 3. Interwar development. Sempil mission. Captain Sempil showing a Sparrowhawk to Admiral Takahashi, 1921. The Japanese Navy had closely monitored the progress of aviation of the three Allied naval powers during World War I and concluded that Britain had made the greatest advances in naval aviation. 7. They had also learned a good deal about naval aviation through their contacts within the Royal Navy. 8. In 1920, a representative had also been sent to Britain to observe the air operations off the decks of Furious. In 1921, the Japanese government formally requested that the British dispatch a naval air mission, in order to develop and to provide a professional edge to Japanese naval aviation. 9. There were reservations on the part of the Admiralty about granting the Japanese unrestricted access to British technology. Despite this, the British government sent an unofficial civil aviation mission to Japan. 10. The Sempil mission, led by Captain William Forbes Sempil, a former officer in the Royal Air Force experienced in the design and testing of Royal Navy aircraft during the First World War. 10. The mission consisted of 27 members, who were largely personnel with experience in naval aviation and included pilots and engineers from several British aircraft manufacturing firms. 10. The British technical mission left for Japan in September with the objective of helping the Imperial Japanese Navy develop and improve the proficiency of its naval air arm. 10. The British government also hoped it would lead to a lucrative arms deal. The mission arrived at Kasumagora Naval Air Station the following month, in November 1921, and stayed in Japan for 18 months. 11. The Japanese were trained on several British aircraft such as the Gloucester Sparrowhawk, as the mission also brought to Kasumagora well over 100 aircraft comprising 20 different models. 5 of which were then currently in service with the Royal Air Force, including the Sparrowhawk. These planes eventually provided the inspiration for the design of a number of Japanese naval aircraft. Technicians became familiar with the newest aerial weapons and equipment, torpedoes, bombs, machine guns, cameras, and communications gear. 10. Naval aviators were trained in various techniques such as torpedo bombing, flight control and carrier landing and takeoffs, skills that would later be employed in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor in December 1941. 12. The mission also brought the plans of the most recent British aircraft carriers, such as HMS Argus and HMS Hermes, which influenced the final stages of the development of the carrier HSH. By the time the last members of the mission had returned to Britain, the Japanese had acquired a reasonable grasp of the latest aviation technology, and the Sempil mission of 1921-22 marked the true beginning of an effective Japanese Naval Air Force. 9. Japanese naval aviation also both in technology and in doctrine. continued to be dependent on the British model for most of the 1920s. The military in Japan were also aided in their quest to build up their naval forces by Sempil himself, who had become a Japanese spy. Over the next 20 years, the British peer provided the Japanese with secret information on the latest British aviation technology. His espionage work helped Japan rapidly develop its military aircraft and its technologies before the Second World War. 13. Carrier aviation. The aircraft carrier HSH in 1922. Japanese interest in the potential of carrier operations demonstrated